Scott Williams once made a billionaire apologize in Arabic and then sent him a case of vintage bourbon shaped like the Boston Harbor. That was the first thing out of my mouth at 5:30 a.m., half awake, still in yesterday's clothes, already brewing coffee while handling a crisis call between two hedge fund princes who both accidentally booked the same Hamptons estate for Labor Day weekend. I wasn't supposed to be on that call. Hell, I wasn't even in the chain of command anymore, apparently. But like always, someone whispered, "Get Brian on this, he'll fix it." So I did. By 6:15 a.m., one prince took the Martha's Vineyard property instead. The real estate agent was sending a complimentary lobster dinner, and I'd prevented what could have been a $200 million grudge match with 2 phone calls and a group text. By 6:30, I was invisible again. I'm Brian Rodriguez, 49 years old, and that's been my rhythm for 22 years at Summit Financial Partners. Executives love treating me like their secret weapon, never invited to the golf weekends, never mentioned in the annual reports, but mysteriously copied on every email that could sink the firm if it went sideways. I started here straight out of Boston University with a finance degree and a willingness to work weekends. Back then, Summit was smaller, scrappier, the kind of place where your ideas mattered more than your last name. I was 27, hungry, and stupid enough to think hard work automatically led to recognition. 22 years later, I'm wiser but not necessarily better off. Don't get me wrong, I've climbed the ladder. Started as a junior analyst, worked my way up to senior operations director. I handle the accounts nobody else wants to touch. The demanding clients, the international complications, the family disputes that could tank million-dollar portfolios. When a tech mogul's divorce threatens to trigger a market sell-off, they call me. When a pharmaceutical heiress wants to move $150 million to Singapore without triggering SEC attention, my phone rings. I don't mind the work. Actually, I love it. There's something satisfying about solving problems that make other people sweat. Let the partners eat their $200 steaks at the Union Club while I keep the ship from hitting the iceberg. They can have their memberships and their media interviews. I'll take the respect that comes from actually knowing what I'm doing. But today felt different. Today, I was prepping for the partnership dinner with the Williams family, our biggest legacy account. The kind of money that doesn't just fund bonuses, it funds private jets and second homes in Aspen. Scott Williams, 58 years old and the iron-fisted chairman of Williams Industries, had built his relationship with us over 15 years. His portfolio alone was worth $400 million under our management. Scott was old-school Boston money. Grew up in Beacon Hill, went to Harvard because his grandfather went to Harvard, built his manufacturing empire the hard way. He appreciated competence over connections, results over relationships. We spoke the same language, the language of getting things done, and now his daughter Jennifer was stepping in. Jennifer Williams, 28 years old, Harvard MBA, trust fund teeth, and a reputation for firing assistants via text message. She'd spent the last 5 years finding herself through various startups that mysteriously never needed to turn a profit. Now Daddy was ready to hand over the family business, and she was ready to play CEO. The firm had been kissing her ass for months. Partners who wouldn't normally acknowledge my existence were suddenly asking my opinion on generational transitions and digital disruption strategies. Tonight's dinner was supposed to seal her ascension into the family business, a ceremonial passing of the torch. Guess who they asked to make sure everything went smooth? Not the partner whose name was on the Williams account for the past decade, not the senior VP with the Hermes ties and the fake Boston accent that came and went depending on who he was talking to. Me. Just keep things running, Brian. You know how these family dynamics work. Jennifer's different from her father, more contemporary. Just stay professional. Translation: babysit the event, stroke the egos, and for the love of God, don't say anything that makes you look like you belong at the grown-ups table. Just smile, keep the wine flowing, and remember your place. I didn't argue. After 22 years, I've learned when to pick my battles. But something scratched at the back of my mind when I reviewed the evening's arrangements and saw my name listed under operations support on the seating chart. 22 years of crisis management, client retention, and revenue protection reduced to 2 words that basically meant helpful staff. Still, I smiled because I knew something they didn't. See, I've survived at Summit for over 2 decades, not because I begged for promotions or played politics, but because I learned how power really works in places like this. Real influence doesn't need a corner office. True leverage doesn't require a spotlight or a business card with multiple titles. I'm not the brand. I'm the engine that makes the brand possible. And tonight, that engine was about to meet Jennifer Williams' entitled worldview at full speed. I had a feeling the collision was going to be spectacular. I did a final check on the reservation at Mistral, made sure Ryan Peterson from our tech team had his phone ready to record the evening for client relations archives, a standard practice for major account dinners, and took a deep breath. The firm had no clue what kind of storm was rolling toward our quiet little corner of the financial district. Jennifer Williams was coming to dinner, and I was about to serve her a masterclass in the difference between privilege and competence. The restaurant was the kind of place where they don't put prices on the menu and the waiters have better suits than most CEOs. Mistral had been Scott Williams' choice for important business dinners for years, intimate enough for real conversation, prestigious enough to impress, and expensive enough to remind everyone that serious money was being discussed. Jennifer Williams was 37 minutes late. I'd just finished checking my watch for the third time when the mahogany doors swung open like she owned the building. She strolled in wearing designer everything, phone pressed to her ear, talking loud enough for the entire dining room to hear about some disruptive fintech opportunity she was considering. No, tell them I'm not interested unless they can prove real scalability, she said into her phone, making sure everyone could hear how important she was. Silicon Valley doesn't sleep, and neither do real innovators. She didn't look at any of us at first, just waved in our general direction while finishing her call. When she finally hung up, she dropped into her chair without an apology and said, "Sorry, had to take that." When you're disrupting traditional finance, the opportunities never stop coming. Nobody asked what the call was about. We all suspected it was probably her personal trainer confirming tomorrow's Pilates session, but the partners were too intimidated to question the princess. She took her seat at the head of the table, her father's usual spot, a detail that didn't go unnoticed by anyone who knew Scott Williams's habits. When the sommelier approached with his practiced presentation about tonight's wine selection, Jennifer laughed and waved him off. Let's not pretend anyone here actually understands wine beyond what costs the most. Just bring something expensive and French. That's what these corporate dinners are for, right? The sommelier's professional smile flickered for just a moment before he recovered and retreated to select something appropriately overpriced. The introductions began with our managing partner doing his usual tap dance. Jeffrey Hartwell had perfected the art of making wealthy people feel important while positioning himself as indispensable. Jennifer, it's truly an honor to have you here tonight. We're all thrilled to see where you'll take the Williams family legacy. Your father has always been visionary, and we know you'll bring fresh, contemporary perspectives to the relationship. Jennifer looked bored, scrolling through Instagram while the firm's brightest minds pitched her like contestants on a reality show. I noticed she had that particular kind of attention span that comes from never having to actually listen to anything that doesn't immediately benefit her. Ryan Peterson, normally confident to the point of arrogance, was practically stuttering through his presentation about our digital transformation initiatives. Kevin Anderson, our CFO, kept adjusting his tie and speaking in the kind of reverent tones usually reserved for discussing quarterly earnings with the Pope. I didn't speak during the introductions. I observed. I made mental notes. I ensured glasses stayed full and conversations flowed smoothly, playing my assigned role as the invisible facilitator who makes everything work without being acknowledged for it. Then, halfway through the main course, a perfectly prepared salmon that probably cost more than most people's weekly salary, Jennifer looked directly at me with the kind of attention she might give to a piece of furniture that had suddenly started moving. "So what exactly do you do here?" she asked, loud enough that two servers paused mid-service to listen. The question hung in the air like smoke from an expensive cigar. I could feel every eye at the table turning toward me, some curious, others nervous about where this might lead. Before I could formulate a response, Jennifer added with a smirk that suggested she'd already decided my answer didn't matter. "Wait, don't tell me. Operations, right? You're the guy who makes sure the printers have toner and the conference rooms are booked properly, the behind-the-scenes stuff." The temperature at our table dropped about 10 degrees. Kevin Anderson turned an interesting shade of red. Jeffrey Hartwell started reaching for his wine glass like it might contain a magical solution to awkward moments. Someone, I think it was Ryan, tried to change the subject to dessert options. I kept my voice steady, professional, the tone I'd perfected over 22 years of dealing with difficult clients and ego-driven executives. I manage client relationships and operations. I make sure nobody here accidentally loses accounts worth 9 figures. She blinked, processed this for about half a second, then laughed. Not a polite chuckle, but a genuine laugh that said she found my response genuinely amusing. Right. Very important work, I'm sure. Someone has to handle the paperwork while the real decision-makers focus on strategy. For the rest of the meal, she ignored me completely, which was perfectly fine. I had other priorities, like watching her systematically alienate every person at the table with her casual dismissiveness. She interrupted Jeffrey twice, corrected Ryan on industry terminology he'd been using for 15 years, and spent most of the entree course typing on her phone. I also noticed that Ryan Peterson, seated 2 chairs down from me, had positioned his phone discreetly to capture the evening's conversation for our client archives. Standard practice for major account dinners, but tonight it felt more significant than usual. Dessert arrived, some architectural masterpiece involving chocolate and gold leaf that looked too expensive to eat. Coffee was served in cups that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. The conversation had moved to safe topics, market outlooks, real estate trends, vacation destinations that normal people only see in magazines. Then, as the evening was winding down and everyone was preparing to leave, I stood up. It was time for the formal goodbye, the handshake ritual that ended every business dinner I'd attended for the past 2 decades. I walked around the table, extending my hand toward Jennifer Williams with the kind of professional courtesy that had served me well throughout my career. "I don't believe we've had a chance to formally meet," I said. "Brian Rodriguez. I've been with Summit since your father first signed with us. It's been a pleasure working on your family's portfolio all these years." She glanced at my outstretched hand, like it was covered in something contagious. Then she leaned back in her chair, looked me up and down with the kind of assessment usually reserved for livestock auctions, and delivered the line that would change everything. "I don't network with middle management." The words hit the table like a judge's gavel. The entire restaurant seemed to freeze. A waiter stopped pouring wine, bottle tilted in midair, dark liquid suspended like time itself. Nobody breathed. The soft jazz music from the corner piano suddenly felt inappropriately cheerful. I felt heat rise in my face, but not from embarrassment, from something colder, sharper. 22 years of professional courtesy, of swallowing small slights and big oversights, of being the reliable guy who fixed things quietly while others took credit loudly. All of it crystallized in that moment into pure, focused clarity. I pulled my hand back slowly, deliberately. "Of course," I said, my voice steady as bedrock. "Thank you for clarifying your networking preferences." Then I turned just enough to catch Ryan Peterson's eye. He was 2 seats down, phone positioned discreetly to record the evening for our client archives. The smallest nod passed between us. We had it, every word, every gesture captured in perfect digital clarity. I sat back down, smoothed my napkin across my lap, took another sip of coffee that had gone cold during the awkward silence, and said nothing else. Let the partners squirm in their expensive seats. Let Jennifer grin like she'd just won some kind of contest. Let the waiter finally finish pouring that suspended wine. I didn't need to retaliate because the recording had already captured the moment she declared war on the wrong person. And tomorrow morning, that footage was going straight to the only man whose opinions still mattered to her. Her father, Scott Williams, the 58-year-old chairman who'd built a $400 million relationship with us based on mutual respect and professional competence. When Scott saw what his daughter had done to the man who'd been protecting his money for 22 years, there would be consequences that no trust fund could cushion. The rest of the dinner passed in a haze of forced pleasantries and nervous laughter. People made safe conversation about upcoming holidays and real estate markets. Jennifer seemed pleased with herself, probably thinking she'd successfully established her authority. The partners looked like they wanted to crawl under the table and disappear. By 9:30 p.m., we were walking out into the cool Boston night. Jennifer climbed into a black Uber that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. The partners scattered to their respective luxury cars, muttering about early morning meetings and important phone calls. I walked the 6 blocks back to my apartment, taking the long way through the public garden. The October air was crisp, full of the promise of changing seasons. Funny how humiliation could feel so much like liberation when you knew it was temporary. By 7:45 the next morning, the video file was in Scott Williams' inbox. No subject line, no body text, no editorial commentary. Just the raw footage from Ryan's phone. Audio crystal clear, camera angle perfect, timestamp undeniable. I didn't include any explanation because Scott Williams was the kind of man who preferred to draw his own conclusions. And once he saw how his daughter had treated me, he'd understand exactly what those conclusions needed to be. I spent that morning doing what I always do, keeping the firm running while everyone else worried about bigger pictures. I reviewed a merger proposal for a pharmaceutical client, approved a wine collection purchase for a tech executive, and mediated a dispute between two family offices over a shared investment opportunity. By 9:15 a.m., the office whispers had started. You know how these things work. Information travels through financial firms like wildfire through dry grass. I caught fragments of conversation near the coffee station by the elevators, in hallway corners where people thought they couldn't be overheard. Said she was completely inappropriate. Brian Rodriguez, what did he do? Apparently she refused to shake his hand, called him middle management or something. Her father's not happy. Someone said he's asking questions. I walked past these conversations without changing expression, coffee mug in hand like it was just another Wednesday morning. But I could feel something shifting in the atmosphere, like air pressure dropping before a thunderstorm. At 10:30 a.m., I received a calendar notification that made me smile for the first time in 24 hours. Williams' transition planning meeting. Canceled. 15 minutes later, I discovered I could no longer access the Williams account strategy folder. Permissions revoked, access denied. By 11 o'clock a.m., my name had been removed from the Williams client email distribution list. They weren't even trying to be subtle about it. No diplomatic explanations about temporary restructuring or streamlining communications. Just digital doors slamming shut, the corporate equivalent of being given the silent treatment by the popular kids at lunch. It was exactly what I'd expected. Jennifer had clearly spent her morning making phone calls, demanding that I be removed from anything related to her family's account. The partners, terrified of losing their biggest client, had immediately complied. Freeze out the troublemaker, they figured. Keep the princess happy at any cost. But I still didn't react. Not when Kevin Anderson sent me a passive-aggressive email about maintaining appropriate professional boundaries with legacy clients. Not when our head of client services accidentally copied me on a message meant for Jeffrey Hartwell. Keep Rodriguez away from any Williams-related discussions until this situation stabilizes. Even when Ryan Peterson found me by the elevators, looking worried and guilty, and asked quietly, "Brian, should I delete the recording? I mean, if it's causing problems." I just smiled and said, "Back it up, twice." Because while they were all scrambling to contain the damage, I was waiting for the real storm to hit. And at 11:47 a.m., it did. At exactly 11:47 a.m., my office phone rang. Not my cell, not email, but the old landline that only gets used for emergencies or when Scott Williams wants to bypass every layer of corporate bureaucracy. It wasn't Scott, it was building security. "Mr. Rodriguez, Mr. Williams is here. He's demanding immediate access to the executive conference room, says he doesn't make appointments for buildings he helped finance." I looked out my window toward the elevator bank. There he was, Scott Williams, walking through our marble lobby like a man with a very specific mission. No assistant, no entourage, no polite scheduling calls. Just him and a black leather portfolio clutched in his hand like prosecutorial evidence. "Let him through," I said, settling back in my chair to watch the show. The executive conference room was hosting a critical presentation with Berkshire Pharmaceutical, a potential new client worth $80 million in managed assets. Months of preparation, PowerPoint slides polished to perfection. Our entire M&A team sweating under the pressure of landing this whale. I didn't warn them. I just watched through my glass office walls as Scott Williams walked past reception, ignored Jeffrey Hartwell's assistant trying to intercept him, and pushed straight through the frosted glass doors of the conference room. He didn't knock. He didn't ask permission. He detonated. "I hope you're not discussing long-term partnerships." His voice cut through the room like a courtroom verdict because this firm just lost its longest one. Complete and total silence. The Berkshire CEO looked like he'd swallowed his presentation notes. Jeffrey Hartwell stood up halfway, then sat back down like his legs had given out. Ryan Peterson, who'd been clicking through slides about our commitment to excellence, simply stared. Scott walked directly to the conference table and dropped his black portfolio in the center, like a judge presenting evidence to a jury. He opened it with deliberate precision, revealing printouts, screenshots, and video stills. There was Jennifer smirking. There was me extending my hand in professional courtesy. The exact moment captured in perfect detail. I don't network with middle management. The still photograph alone looked like a frame from a documentary about how privilege destroys everything it touches. Scott didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "This man," he said, tapping the photo with his index finger, "has managed my family's assets for 22 years. Before your growth projections, before your strategic initiatives, before your succession fantasies." Then he slowly, deliberately pulled out a signed investment agreement, our contract renewal worth $400 million, and tore it cleanly in half. The sound echoed through the conference room like breaking glass in a cathedral. "Now," he said, folding the pieces with surgical precision, "he's the reason you'll never see another dollar of Williams' money." He turned toward the door but paused just long enough to look Jeffrey Hartwell directly in the eyes. "Next time you want to humiliate a professional, make sure his client isn't watching." And then he was gone, leaving behind nothing but shredded contracts and the kind of silence that follows explosions. I remained at my desk, calmly reviewing a real estate acquisition proposal, like I hadn't just witnessed 22 years of careful relationship building destroy an entire firm's complacency in under 5 minutes. The aftermath was swift and merciless. Phones started ringing immediately. Assistants began scrambling. Lawyers pulled up damage control protocols that had never been tested on this scale. The Berkshire executives mumbled something about rescheduling and fled the building like it was contaminated. For the first time in 22 years, I wasn't Summit's invisible problem solver. I was their only hope for survival. The emergency meeting lasted 3 hours. Every C-suite executive crammed into the small war room, voices hushed like they were planning a funeral instead of a corporate resurrection. I didn't join them. I had work to do. At 3:20 p.m., Jeffrey Hartwell knocked on my office door, hair disheveled, tie askew, wearing the expression of a man who'd just watched his retirement fund evaporate in real time. "Brian," he began, voice trembling slightly, "we need to talk. Obviously, this morning was unexpected. We're prepared to make this right." I looked at him with the kind of calm that comes from knowing you hold every card in the deck. "We'd like to offer you a full promotion to managing director, complete authority over client relations, strategic partnerships, and account development, plus equity participation and a compensation package that reflects your actual value to this firm." I reached into my desk and pulled out a leather notebook I'd been keeping for the past 5 years. Inside, detailed documentation of every contribution I'd made that went unrecognized, every crisis I'd solved that got attributed to someone else, every client relationship I'd built that somehow became someone else's success story. "I'm not here for a promotion," I said quietly. "You don't need a managing director. You need a complete leadership restructuring." Jeffrey's face went pale. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you what happens next. Jennifer Williams cost you $400 million in 30 seconds because she confused privilege with competence. How many other clients are wondering if that attitude represents your firm's values?" 2 weeks later, the board voted unanimously. Managing director, effective immediately. Jennifer had quietly decided to pursue entrepreneurial opportunities in sustainable technology. 3 senior partners who'd spent years perfecting the art of taking credit for other people's work had stepped back to explore new ventures. 6 months after that, Summit Financial Partners had grown by 25%. 4 major clients had referred family offices to us specifically because they trusted our authentic leadership approach. Our client retention rate hit an all-time high. Last month, Industry Weekly ran a feature about the quiet revolution in wealth management. They interviewed me for 45 minutes about leadership, respect, and the importance of recognizing talent regardless of title. The article mentioned my 22-year journey from analyst to managing director and how merit-based leadership creates sustainable results. They didn't mention the dinner. They didn't need to. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. Sometimes it's building something so successful that their failure becomes a footnote in your success story. 22 years of being underestimated. 1 dinner, 1 recording. 1 father who understood that respect isn't negotiable. The crown wasn't given to me. I earned it, one overlooked contribution at a time.